Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where silk flows like water, incense curls in the air like lazy cats, and the soft murmur of loyal voices drifts across the desert sands. It's one of those evenings after a long, dusty battle, the kind where you'd imagine swords clashing, war cries echoing across dunes. But instead, you find yourself in the king's private tent, where the real magic happens. And let me tell you, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes here. Between the heat, the perfume so strong they could knock out a camel, and the etiquette so strict you'd probably get banished for sneezing too loudly. It's a whole different world. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Whether it's a cozy bed in Toronto or a hammock in Bali. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle through the heavy folds of the Persian king's tent, the fabric brushing against your skin like 1,000 whispers. The air is thick, sweet, musky, and a bit like if someone tried to bottle the smell of warm sand mixed with dried figs. Your feet sink into carpets, so plush they seem to sigh under your weight, each thread glimmering with the golden sheen of woven silk. It's the kind of floor you half expect to be booby-trapped, but no, this is just how Persian kings roll. Outside, the clink of armor fades into the distance, replaced by the softer sounds of a world at rest, the faint laughter of soldiers swapping tales, the hiss of oil lamps, and the distant shuffle of sandals on marble. Somewhere, a flute whispers its lonely tune, weaving through the night air like a thread through a tapestry. The king sits at the heart of it all, reclining on a divan so ornate it looks like it was stolen from a god's living room. He's draped in robes that shimmer under the lamplight, and you catch a glimpse of intricate embroidery. Tiny hunting scenes stitched in gold thread, so fine it makes your own clothes feel like sackcloth in comparison. The king's face is a study in contrasts. Sharp eyes softened by the slight droop of exhaustion, lips that twitch into a half-smile as he listens to the murmurs around him. His beard, oiled and combed to perfection, glistens under the flicker of flames, and there's a faint scent of sandalwood that clings to the air around him, warm, spicy, and just a little bit smug, like someone who knows he can command 1,000 men with a single raised eyebrow. You watch as an attendant approaches, holding a small golden bowl filled with a thick, honey-colored paste. The king lifts his foot, yes, his bare foot, because apparently royal toes don't touch the ground like the rest of us. And another servant begins to gently massage the paste into his heels. It smells faintly of saffron and something sharper. Maybe myrrh or frankincense. You can't help but think it's a bit like giving your feet a spa day after you've conquered an empire. Ah, the king sighs, his voice low and smooth, like a cat stretching in the sun. Let it be known, victory tastes sweeter with soft heels. You try not to snort out loud. Somewhere behind you, someone whispers about how the king insists on this ritual after every major battle, as if the fate of the empire hinges on whether his feet are properly moisturized. And you know what? Maybe it does. After all, imagine trying to rule the largest empire in the world with cracked heels. Talk about a bad day at the office. The aroma in the tent is something else entirely. Layers upon layers of spice and smoke, so thick you feel like you're breathing in the desert itself. There's cinnamon, cloves, a hint of dried apricot, and, oddly enough, something that smells suspiciously like roasted onions. You glance around, half expecting to see a royal chef whipping up a midnight snack. But no, it's just the king's personal incense blend, designed to balance the humors, whatever that means. A quiet murmur drifts through the tent, as an elder storyteller begins a tale. Something about a warrior who once outran a wild bull by sheer willpower and a pair of particularly lucky sandals. The details get fuzzy, though, because the story keeps changing depending on who's telling it. And, of course, the historians are still debating whether it actually happened, or if it's just one of those "he once wrestled a crocodile blindfolded" kind of stories. You settle back, feeling the warmth of the tent seep into your bones. The night outside is cool, but in here, it's like the air itself has been thickened with memories. You hear the faint rustle of silk, the gentle clink of jewelry as the king shifts his weight, and somewhere near the back of the tent, the soft sound of a servant dozing off. Because even in the shadow of empires, people still fall asleep when they've had a long day. Your eyes drift to the entrance, where the wind flutters the heavy drapes, and for a moment, you swear you can smell the desert. Dry, wild, endless. It's the scent of a world that's both ancient and alive, waiting just beyond the tent walls. And as the king leans back, his eyes half closed, you realize that this moment of stillness after the storm, with the scent of sandalwood and saffron hanging in the air like a promise, is the true reward of power. Not the crown, not the riches, but the simple, quiet breath of a night survived. The golden paste glistens on the king's heels, catching the firelight, and you wonder, does it feel sticky, warm, slightly itchy in that way ointments always are? But you keep that thought to yourself, because the last thing you want is to interrupt the king's post-battle spa day. Outside, the stars shimmer cold and distant, like little sparks waiting for their own stories to be told. And you breathe in the scents, the sounds, the soft, endless hum of a world that, for tonight at least, has paused its battles to rest. The tent sighs around you, and your eyelids start to grow heavy. You feel the warmth of the tent settle into your skin, and before you know it, you're following the king's footsteps. Well, not exactly footsteps, since, remember, his royal toes never touch the floor. It's more like a glide, really. The king drifts across the tent, his robes trailing behind him, like silk waves on a lazy river. You catch a glimpse of the intricate embroidery again, tiny figures stitched in gold thread, locked in eternal battle, their spears raised mid-charge. There's a sense of movement, of story woven into every fold. Then, you notice something odd. The king's path is carefully laid out with a series of golden carpets, each one slightly overlapping the other, like a soft, gleaming trail through the tent. You step gingerly, trying not to wrinkle the fabric, though, between you and me, your feet are nowhere near important enough to warrant a carpet. As the king moves, a pair of attendants rush ahead to adjust the carpets, smooth out a wrinkle here, shift a corner there. It's a whole operation, a choreography of carpets. And here's the kicker. These aren't just any carpets. They're woven with threads soaked in saffron, dyed with indigo, imported from faraway lands, and this is the part that makes you raise an eyebrow, sprinkled with a secret blend of crushed herbs meant to ward off ill winds, whatever that means. You half expect the carpets to burst into a song and dance number any minute now as King pauses, and an elderly servant, his beard so long it could be used as a curtain tie, approaches with a small jar. He bows so low his turban nearly grazes the floor, then opens the jar to reveal a thick, glistening oil. It smells like something between a citrus orchard and a bonfire, with a hint of roasted walnuts. The king raises one foot, again floating more than lifting, and the servant begins rubbing the oil into the king's heels, each stroke precise, almost reverent. You can't help but think it's a bit like watching someone polish a rare antique, or a prized camel saddle. And then, the king says, almost absently, "Let it be known, a ruler's strength is measured by the softness of his heels." You stifle a laugh, because, really, What a thing to say, but hey, who are you to argue with a man whose throne literally has tigers embroidered into the armrests? The other attendants murmur in agreement, though you catch one of them sneaking a quick eye roll when the king isn't looking. And that's when it hits you. This whole carpet ritual isn't just for comfort, it's a show. It's a performance of power, a reminder that the king's feet never touch the dust of the battlefield, that even after a day of blood and dust, his heels are pampered like they belong in a palace made of clouds. A little to the side, a younger servant whispers to another. They say the oil is mixed with a secret ingredient, the tears of defeated warriors. You glance over sharply, but the boy just grins and shrugs. Maybe it's a joke, maybe it's not. Historians are still debating whether that was a real thing, or just one of those wild rumors that swirls around court life. As the scent of the oil fills the air, mingling with the ever-present cloud of incense and the faint musk of sweat from the long day, you notice something else. Beneath the soft sounds of the tent, there's a steady rhythm. The thud, thud, thud of drums outside, slow and deep, like the heartbeat of the empire itself. It's calming, almost hypnotic, and you find yourself swaying slightly with the beat, as if your body can't help but tune into the rhythm of Persian power. And then, as if on cue, a pair of musicians enter, carrying long-necked lutes and tiny finger cymbals that chime like droplets of silver. They settle near the king's side, their heads bowed low, waiting for the slightest nod. The king doesn't speak, but the tilt of his chin is enough. The music begins. Soft, winding, like a desert breeze sneaking through palm fronds. The notes twist and curl, and suddenly, you're not just in a tent. You're on a caravan winding through the Zagros Mountains, or standing at the edge of a battle camp where warriors sharpen blades under the stars. You catch a snatch of conversation nearby, someone murmuring about how the music is said to calm the fire in the belly after a battle. And you think, sure, that, or it's just a really fancy way of saying, let's all chill out so we don't start arguing over who gets the last date from the fruit platter. A soft breeze rustles the tent flaps, bringing with it the faintest hint of roasted spices from the camp kitchen, where someone's probably preparing a midnight snack of lamb skewers or pistachio-stuffed flatbreads. Your stomach gives a quiet grumble, and you wonder if the king ever gets late-night cravings. Probably not. He's too busy having his heels massaged and his carpets adjusted. The drums outside slow, the lutes quiet, and the music lingers in the air like the last glow of embers. The king leans back, eyes half closed, his face illuminated by the flickering lamplight. His breath slows, his hands rest easy on the armrests, and for a moment you could almost believe the empire runs itself. Carpets, oils, musicians, and all. And yet, as you glance around the tent, taking in the rows of attendants poised like statues, the flickering of a single flame, the heavy scent of spices that clings to everything like a second skin, you realize, this is power. Not the battlefield, not the sword, but this quiet, calculated ritual of softness, of ease, of feet that never know the sting of a pebble. You sigh, the warmth wrapping around you like a silk cocoon, and let your eyes drift half-closed as the tent sighs and shifts, holding the quiet weight of the king's presence. The world hums on, soft and steady, as the carpets stretch on before you. The air in the tent hums like a golden thread pulling through fabric, and as you follow the soft shuffle of footsteps, you catch the scent of something new. Rich and smoky, with a hint of roasted meat and the sharp bite of pomegranate. Your stomach gives a hopeful little lurch, and sure enough, you glance to the side and spot a long, low table being set beneath the glow of hanging lamps. It's dinner time. Well, royal dinner time, which, in case you were wondering, isn't exactly the same as the leftover cold pizza on the couch situation you've got going at home. The table is covered in dishes so elaborate, you feel like you've wandered into a painting. There's roasted lamb glazed in honey and saffron, bowls of rice studded with jewels of ruby red barberries, and a platter of dates, simisi, so plump they look like they could burst into a sticky mess at any second. And there, in the center, sits a salad. Yes, a salad. Except, this one is unlike any salad you've ever seen. A mixture of crushed rose petals, mint, and tiny purple blossoms, all glistening with a drizzle of pomegranate syrup. It's said to cool the fire of the heart, though you're pretty sure it's just a fancy way of saying, let's impress the guests with something weirdly poetic. The king, of course, sits at the head of the table, his plate piled with the best of the best. He lifts a slice of lamb with fingers glinting with rings, and as he takes a bite, a faint smile tugs at his lips. His eyes flicker, just for a moment, toward a servant standing a little too stiffly nearby. One of those subtle glances that probably means, if this lamb is overcooked, you're getting reassigned to stable duty. A cupbearer steps forward, holding a goblet of deep red wine, so dark it looks almost black. The wine is infused with spices, and as you breathe in, you catch the heady scent of cinnamon, cloves, and something you can't quite place. Maybe cardamom? Or perhaps it's just the smell of centuries-old victory. As the king takes a sip, a small group of nobles exchange glances. One of them, a man with a nose like an eagle's beak and a beard so thick it looks like he's hiding a family of sparrows in there, clears his throat. He leans in and murmurs, "They say the pomegranate was planted by the gods themselves, its seeds a symbol of immortality." Another noble nods solemnly, as if this is the most profound thing anyone has said all evening. And yet, you can't help but think, immortality through fruit? That's a stretch. Historians still argue whether that whole divine pomegranate theory was ever really believed, or if it was just a poetic flourish added centuries later to make the Persians sound even cooler. A soft breeze nudges the tent flaps, and the lamps flicker, casting long, swaying shadows across the feast. The air is thick with the scent of roasted spices, the low hum of conversation, and the occasional clatter of a serving platter. You notice a curious detail. The plates themselves are inlaid with tiny gems, turquoise, carnelian, and lapis lazuli, embedded so skillfully it's almost as if the food is resting on a bed of stars. It's the kind of thing that makes you wonder if the king ever gets distracted mid-meal, staring at the plate and thinking, "Did I just eat a jewel?" The servers move like ghosts, weaving through the tent in practiced silence, each one carrying a specific dish, a specific scent, a specific role. There's even one servant whose only job, apparently, is to sprinkle a thin dusting of crushed rose petals over the tablecloth, like a living garnish. You watch as a tiny flurry of petals falls onto the king's sleeve, and he flicks it away with a casual elegance that makes you think, yeah, that's a man who's never done the dishes. A laugh bubbles up near the far end of the table as a noble tells a story about a battle won not by swords, but by an unexpected rainstorm that flooded the enemy's camp. You lean in, intrigued, but the details are fuzzy. Some say it was divine intervention. Others claim it was just bad planning. No one seems entirely sure, and the scholars are still debating whether the story holds any real truth. But hey, it makes for a good tale to tell over wine. The night deepens, and as the plates empty and the cups refill, the king leans back in his seat, a faint look of satisfaction on his face. You wonder what it must feel like, to sit at the head of an empire, your feet pampered, your food sprinkled with rose petals, your goblet brimming with wine that tastes like a liquid sunset. Probably pretty good, you think, as long as you don't choke on a pomegranate seed. The music picks up again, soft strings and the gentle thrum of a drum steady and slow, like a heartbeat you can feel in your bones. The king tilts his head, listening, and for a moment, the whole tent seems to pause. You breathe in the scent of roasted lamb, crushed flowers, and ancient stories, and let it all settle around you like a warm, fragrant blanket. Your eyelids grow heavy, and the distant sounds of laughter blur into the hum of the night. You linger near the table, feeling the lull of the music settle into your bones like a soft, slow pulse. But soon, a subtle shift in the air draws your attention. A hush rippling through the tent, like a ripple on still water. Servants begin clearing the remnants of the feast with the silent efficiency of shadows, and the king rises, his robes flowing like liquid gold in the lamplight. It's time for the bathhouse ritual. You trail behind, weaving through the maze of carpets and silk-draped corridors, the scent of roasted spices and rosewater, slowly giving way to something sharper, steamier. The air grows warmer with every step, damp with the promise of heat and relaxation. The bathhouse is tucked within a secluded corner of the camp, a marvel of engineering carried across the Empire's vast reaches. Steam curls up in ghostly tendrils, catching the lamplight in soft glimmers, while attendants shuffle around carrying brass basins, stacks of linen towels, and bundles of fragrant herbs. The walls of the bath are made of polished stone, and the floors gleam, wet and smooth, like river rocks worn by time. You breathe in deeply, and the air hits you, hot, damp, and layered with scents. Mint leaves crushed underfoot, lavender bundles hanging from hooks, and a faint, almost spicy tang of saffron-infused oils. Somewhere, a low, rhythmic splash echoes, as if the water itself is keeping time with the Empire's heartbeat. The king settles onto a marble bench as a servant begins pouring warm water over his shoulders in slow, steady streams. You watch as the water flows down, catching in the folds of his robe before trickling to the floor, forming little rivulets that snake toward the drain. The king lets out a long sigh, the kind that speaks of both exhaustion and the quiet pleasure of being tended to after a long day. Another servant approaches, carrying a small cloth bag that rattles faintly with the sound of seeds. With great ceremony, the servant opens the bag and reveals a fine powder, crushed myrtle leaves mixed with ground lotus petals, and if the whispers are to be believed, a pinch of something far stranger, powdered emerald. Yes, powdered emerald. They say it's meant to enhance the glow of the skin, though you have to wonder who first thought, you know what this bath needs. Crushed gemstones. Historians still bicker over whether this was an actual practice or just a bit of courtly exaggeration. But hey, it makes for a good story. The powder is sprinkled into the water, and soon the air shimmers with a faint, minty scent that makes your nose tingle. The water turns a pale greenish hue, like you've just stepped into a bowl of melted jade. You watch as the king reclines, his eyes half-lidded, a contented smile playing at the corners of his mouth. And then, the attendants bring out a long-handled brush with bristles so soft they could have been plucked from the wings of angels, or at least, very fluffy goats. They begin to scrub the king's skin in long, slow strokes, and you swear you hear a faint chuckle from the king as he leans into it. "Ah," he murmurs, voice low and smooth. "Let it be known. No ruler conquers the world without first conquering his pores." You stifle a laugh, though a servant nearby definitely snorts into his sleeve. A quiet voice near the door murmurs a fact you didn't expect. Some believe that the heat of the bath helps release the warrior's spirit, letting the sweat carry away the residue of battle. Others argue that the baths are simply for comfort, but the scholars can't seem to agree. Either way, you're pretty sure the king isn't too concerned. He just wants to soak. You glance around and notice something unusual. Tiny brass bowls, each holding a single, flickering flame, floating on the surface of the water. They sway gently as the attendants move, casting dancing reflections across the wet stone walls. The flames seem to breathe with the room, pulsing in time with the slow, steady drip of water. And then there's the singing. Soft voices rise in a wordless hum, low, deep, and almost hypnotic. It's not a song you recognize, more like an echo from a dream, or a memory from a place you've never been. The sound fills the space, rising and falling with the steam, wrapping around you like a warm fog. You can feel the tension in your shoulders melting away, your breath slowing to match the rhythm of the water, the brush, the hum. A servant offers the king a small clay cup filled with a dark liquid, brewed from herbs you've never heard of, with names like sleepthorn and desert whisper. They say it soothes the body and sharpens the mind, though you suspect it probably just tastes like muddy mint tea. The king sips, eyes half closed, and the scent of the bath fills your nose. A heady mix of mint, rose, and the faintest trace of something smoky and ancient. You let the warmth seep into your bones, the sounds and scents swirling together, and you wonder, what must it feel like to be a king? To sit in a bath of emerald dust, to have your skin scrubbed by a dozen attendants, to sip tea brewed from herbs with names that sound like whispered secrets. Probably pretty amazing, though you can't help but wonder if the brush tickles. The tent walls ripple in the breeze, the light of the flames glimmering like stars in a sky made of steam. And as you drift in the warmth, the hum of the song fading into the background, you feel the weight of the day slipping away, dissolving into the soft embrace of water and shadows. The warmth of the bath lingers on your skin as the air grows cooler, a soft breath of night slipping through the tense, heavy fabric. The king, now wrapped in a linen robe that shimmers faintly in the lamplight, rises from his marble bench, his every movement slow, deliberate, as though the weight of 1,000 years rests gently on his shoulders. There's a hush, a ripple of anticipation, because it's time for the next ritual, the one the younger soldiers whisper about in half-belief, the games of strength and wit. You follow as the king moves to a low, cushioned area in the center of the tent, where a small circle has been cleared on the carpet. The flicker of oil lamps casts playful shadows on the embroidered walls, and the scent of sandalwood and crushed herbs still hangs thick in the air, like a memory you can't quite shake. Servants bustle in, carrying wooden boards, strange little tokens, and a large covered basket that seems to hum with the promise of something unexpected. You hear the faintest rustle from within and wonder, with a small prickle of unease, what exactly is in there? The king settles himself on a cushion, his legs crossed, his fingers adorned with rings that flash in the lamplight. His gaze sharpens, and the room seems to lean in, holding its breath. A servant removes the basket's cover, and there, yes, really, are live beetles, their shiny black shells glinting under the lamps. They scuttle across the board, little legs ticking like tiny clocks. The king's eyes crinkle in amusement as he gestures toward the board, a game the Persians call the beetle chase. The rules? Well, no one really knows, and they seem to change every time someone asks. The beetles are guided by small sticks, encouraged to move toward different colored tokens, and bets are whispered between nobles on which beetle will cross a painted line first. It's absurd, delightful, and oddly mesmerizing. You lean closer, watching as the king nudges a beetle gently with a slender reed, his fingers moving with a practiced ease. One of the nobles, an older man with a voice like gravel, leans in and murmurs, "They say the king once trained a beetle to recognize the scent of rosewater." A younger noble scoffs under his breath, muttering that such a thing is impossible, and somewhere across the room, A servant whispers, "Historians still argue about whether that's true." The game continues, laughter rippling through the tent as a particularly plucky beetle makes an unexpected sprint across the board, causing a small eruption of cheers and groans. The king raises an eyebrow, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his face, as if to say, "Ah, the beetle knows." A plate of spiced almonds is passed around, and you take one, feeling the sharp, warm tingle of cumin and salt on your tongue. The flavor lingers, mixing with the scent of sandalwood and the faint buzz of conversation. And then the king shifts gears, quite literally, by pulling out a different game, an ancient board, inlaid with lapis lazuli and mother of pearl, with tiny ivory pieces shaped like lions and gazelles. It's called Nard, an ancestor of backgammon, and as the board is set, the air shifts, lighter, sharper, like the start of a new story. The king motions for a noble to join him, and the two settle in, dice clicking softly in their hands. The stakes are whispered, quiet enough to feel like a secret, and you catch only fragments: a prized falcon, a bolt of the finest silk, a promise whispered beneath the starlit sky. The king's eyes gleam as the dice tumble, and you feel the tension in the room, a thread pulled tight between chance and strategy. The conversation drifts back to stories. Tales of warriors who fought with bare hands, of battles won by clever tricks and unexpected turns. Someone recalls the time a general supposedly convinced an entire enemy camp to surrender by releasing a flock of doves with tiny flaming torches strapped to their backs. You blink at that, wondering if it's even remotely true. Scholars still argue, of course, whether that was a real tactic or just a bit of poetic flair added by court scribes trying to make the king look even more clever. The king chuckles, his gaze steady on the board as he moves his pieces with a flick of the wrist. His beard glimmers with the faint scent of sandalwood oil, and you can't help but notice a tiny smudge of green dust on his robe. Maybe a leftover from the bath, maybe something else entirely. The room is warm with laughter, the gentle click of dice, and the soft flutter of silk. A servant refills goblets with dark wine, and you take a slow sip, letting the taste bloom on your tongue. Rich, spiced, a little bit sharp, like the moment just before a storm breaks. The king leans back, his expression one of easy satisfaction, the kind that says, "For tonight, the world is mine." And for a moment, you believe it. Your eyelids feel heavy, the scent of sandalwood thick in your nose, the sounds of the game blurring into the soft thrum of night. The beetles scuttle across the board, the dice roll again, and the stories drift on, soft and endless as the desert wind. The laughter from the beetle game still hums softly in the air as the night deepens, and the scent of roasted almonds and sandalwood begins to fade, replaced by something sharper, greener. The king rises once more, a fluid, deliberate motion, and the room seems to tilt in his direction, as if the very air is drawn toward him. You follow as he moves to a side entrance, the heavy tent flaps parting to reveal a moonlit courtyard just beyond. The air outside is cooler, crisp with a faint edge of desert chill, and you breathe it in, feeling it clear with the fog from your head. A garden stretches before you, enclosed by high canvas walls that ripple in the night breeze. It's a secret place, reserved for the king and a select few, a hidden patch of green in the middle of a sprawling camp. The king's herbalist is waiting, a thin figure draped in simple robes, his hands stained with the deep green of crushed leaves. He bows low, then gestures to the plants growing in orderly rows: mint, basil, saffron crocus, and stranger things. Twisting vines with tiny yellow flowers and thick, waxy leaves that smell faintly of lemons when crushed. The king bends to examine a plant, his fingers brushing lightly over its leaves, and the herbalist murmurs something about its properties. good for digestion, excellent for fevers, and possibly useful for warding off scorpions, though he admits no one's entirely sure. Historians still debate whether the Persians really believed scorpion venom could be neutralized by chewing specific herbs, or if that was just a hopeful bit of folk wisdom whispered across generations. A small clay pot is placed at the king's feet, and from it rises the sharp, clean scent of freshly ground myrtle. The king inhales deeply, eyes half closed, as if the scent alone can sweep away the dust of battle. You hear the faintest murmur. "The breath of the gods," someone whispers nearby, though whether they're serious or just indulging in a bit of poetic flair is anyone's guess. The king turns, his gaze sweeping the garden like a painter considering his canvas, and gestures toward a low bench. He sits, the herbs rustling softly as he settles, and the herbalist begins preparing small bundles of leaves, crushing them with a smooth stone, and mixing them with honey in a tiny bronze bowl. The mixture glistens in the moonlight, thick, golden, and fragrant, like a potion from an old story. The air hums with quiet conversation. Someone mentions how the Persians believed the scent of certain herbs could strengthen courage before battle, and you imagine warriors standing beneath the moon, breathing in the sharp tang of mint, the smoky sweet scent of saffron, the delicate perfume of rose petals. Others, though, argue that it was just a pleasant distraction, a way to ease the mind before the chaos of war. No one can quite agree, of course. The king dips his fingers into the mixture and rubs a bit on his wrists, the scent blooming in the cool night air. You watch as an attendant carefully offers a small, steaming cup, an herbal infusion brewed from leaves plucked only at dawn, or so the herbalist claims. It smells faintly bitter, with a hint of citrus and something you can't quite place. Maybe a touch of smoke, like the memory of a distant campfire. The king sips slowly, his gaze drifting upward to the stars, those cold, brilliant pinpricks scattered across the velvet sky. A breeze stirs the leaves, and you catch the faintest whisper of something. A secret? A prayer? Or just the sigh of the earth beneath a ruler's feet? The herbalist, ever so quietly, begins to hum a soft tune, low and rhythmic, like the rustling of leaves in a hidden grove. The sound is oddly soothing, a lullaby for an empire, and you find yourself swaying gently, your breath slowing to match the quiet rhythm. You glance down and notice a small beetle crawling across a leaf, its tiny legs moving with deliberate purpose. For a moment, it feels like the whole world has shrunk to this garden, this patch of green, this quiet hum, this king breathing in the scent of herbs as if it holds the key to everything. The scent of mint and honey lingers in the air, sweet and sharp, and you feel it settle into your bones, wrapping around you like a soft, invisible blanket. Your eyes drift half-closed, and you imagine the king's thoughts swirling in the quiet night, of battles won, of empires built, of the simple, fleeting pleasure of a warm cup in a garden under the stars. The air hums, the leaves rustle, and the moon glimmers above, cold and watchful. The scent of mint and honey still clings to the airs as the king rises from the garden bench, his robe catching the moonlight like a faint shimmer of stardust. The quiet hum of the herbalist's tune fades behind you as you follow him back into the heart of the tent, where a new ritual waits, fluttering like a secret between the folds of silk. The silver-handled fan. It's not just any fan, of course. You glance at it, resting delicately on a silk cushion, its ribs gleaming with inlays of silver, mother of pearl, and the faintest hint of jade. The fabric is gossamer thin, painted with swirling patterns of vines and lotus flowers that seem to sway gently, even when there's no breeze. A pair of attendants step forward, bowing low, their eyes lowered in a careful dance of deference. They lift the fan together, as though it's some sacred relic, and begin to wave it slowly in the king's direction. The motion is rhythmic, back and forth, soft and measured, a breeze so delicate it barely stirs the curls at the king's temples. But here's the twist. The attendants don't just wave the fan however they please. No, there are rules. 47 of them, to be exact. One of the younger attendants, barely more than a boy, whispers the rules to himself under his breath as he moves. Don't fan too quickly. Don't fan too slowly. Don't let the edges of the fan dip. Don't fan when the king is drinking. And, this one makes you blink, never ever let the breeze fall directly on the king's left ear. Apparently, that's considered a terrible omen. You catch a snatch of conversation nearby, someone murmuring that a fan-bearer once got the breeze just a little too strong, and the king's turban shifted. The poor soul was reassigned to camel washing duty for the next 5 years. Harsh, maybe, but when you rule an empire, even the air itself must obey. The fan shimmers as it moves, casting flickering patterns across the walls of the tent. Like a living shadow play, the scent of sandalwood drifts through the space, mingling with the faint rustle of silk and the quiet, almost imperceptible sound of the fan slicing through the air. It's hypnotic, really. You feel your own breath slowing to match the rhythm. Inhale as the fan rises, exhale as it falls. A noble leans in, voice hushed, and says, "They say the breeze from the king's fan is thought to carry blessings. If you stand in its path, you'll be granted good fortune for a year." You glance at the fan's path and quietly scoot a little closer, just in case. After all, a little extra luck never hurts. Another voice, older and scratchier, mutters that the Persians believed the fan could dispel bad dreams, chase away lingering spirits, and even, in some cases, soothe the heart of a tired warrior. Whether that's a poetic metaphor or just an excuse to enjoy a bit of cool air, no one seems quite sure. Historians still argue about it. Some say the fan was a status symbol, while others believe it had deeper, almost mystical significance. As the fan sways, you notice the king's eyelids growing heavier, the lines of his face softening, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. The air around him seems to shimmer, as if the breeze itself carries whispers, memories of past battles, victories, quiet moments, like this one, where the weight of the world pauses, if only for a breath. The attendants never falter, their arms moving in perfect rhythm, their faces serene yet focused, like dancers in an intricate performance only they understand. You wonder if they ever get tired, if their arms ache, if they dream of dropping the fan, or if they take secret pride in this quiet, precise art of breeze-making. A soft clink of bracelets breaks the stillness, and you glance over to see one of the king's consorts adjusting her bangles, their tiny charms catching the lamplight. The sound is delicate, almost musical, blending seamlessly into the hum of the tent, the gentle swoosh of the fan, and the soft crackle of oil lamps. The air feels heavier now, rich with the scent of sandalwood and the quiet weight of power. The king leans back, his gaze unfocused, as if he's drifting somewhere far away. Perhaps to the battlefield, perhaps to a memory of a lover's touch, or perhaps just into the slow, endless rhythm of the fan. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sounds and scents wrap around you. The whisper of silk, the flicker of flames, the gentle hum of night, and the slow, steady breeze, carrying with it the weight of tradition, of stories half remembered, of a world where even the air must follow rules. And as you breathe it all in, you feel a curious sense of calm, as if, for just this moment, you too are part of the ritual, drifting on the breeze, weightless and warm, a soft sigh in the heart of the empire. The fan sways, the night hums, and you let it all carry you into the quiet. The quiet rhythm of the fan lingers in your mind, like a soft echo, as the king shifts in his seat. the silver-handled fan still swaying in slow, deliberate arcs. But the air in the tent begins to shift again, thicker now, richer, like a tapestry woven from scent itself. You catch it first as a whisper, something warm, dark, and a little sweet, like the lingering trace of a distant fire. A servant steps forward, carrying a small, ornate tray lined with tiny flasks and stoppered bottles, each one carefully arranged in perfect symmetry. The bottles gleam in the lamplight, some dark and heavy like molten obsidian, others shimmering pale gold, their glass so fine it seems to shimmer like a soap bubble. The tray is a quiet symphony of power. These are the aromas of the Empire, the bottled whispers of Persian dominance. The king leans forward slightly, his fingers hovering above the tray, as though it holds the key to something far greater than scent. He selects a bottle, its neck slender, the glass etched with tiny patterns of vines and hunting scenes, and unstoppers it with a soft pop. The air around you shifts instantly, and the scent blooms. Ambergris, warm and musky, laced with something faintly salty, like the memory of an ocean breeze wrapped in silk. You breathe it in and, honestly, you're not sure if you like it. It's rich, almost too rich, like wearing a velvet robe in the middle of summer. You glance sideways and catch the faintest grimace on a young noble's face before he smooths it into a practiced look of admiration. The king, however, seems pleased, and he gestures for the bottle to be passed around. As it moves, someone murmurs, "They say ambergris comes from the belly of a whale, or maybe a sea monster." Another voice, more skeptical, counters, "Or maybe it's just whale vomit." The conversation trails off into soft laughter, though you know, because you're paying attention, that historians still argue over whether the ancients fully understood where ambergris came from. Some thought it was a gift from the gods. Others, just a peculiar treasure washed ashore. The king dabs a drop onto his wrist, rubbing it gently, and the scent mixes with the faint aroma of sandalwood still lingering from earlier. It's a layered thing, this fragrance. Rich, mysterious, and frankly, a little overwhelming. Another bottle is opened, this one releasing a sharp, almost medicinal scent, like crushed pine needles mixed with warm earth. "Myrrh," someone whispers, the resin of desert trees, prized for its ability to mask the scent of blood and sweat after battle. You glance at the king, wondering if that's why he likes it. If, beneath the silk and the scent, there's still the faint echo of war clinging to his skin. The bottles make their way around the room, and each new scent tells a different story. There's spikenard, warm and spicy, a favorite of queens and scholars alike, and rose oil, soft and heady, the petals said to be plucked at dawn by handmaids who sing as they work, their voices rising with the sun. A noble near you leans in and murmurs, "They say a single drop of rose oil can buy a house in the provinces." You blink, wondering if that's true, or just another tale spun to impress. The scholars, of course, argue about the exact value, because scholars, as you've probably guessed by now, love to argue. The air grows thick with fragrance, and for a moment, it's almost too much. A swirl of scents so rich and layered, it feels like the air itself is pressing down on your skin. You take a slow breath, feeling the weight of the night settle into your bones. The king's eyes drift half-closed, his fingers tracing patterns on the armrest, and you wonder what he's thinking. Does he remember the battles he's fought? The lands he's conquered? The empires that whisper his name in fear and reverence? Or is he simply enjoying the scent of myrrh and rose and sandalwood blending in the heavy air, letting it lull him into a quiet trance? The flames in the oil lamps dance lazily, their reflections winking off the polished silver of the fan and the gleaming brass of the perfume tray. The tent feels like a warm cocoon, the scents wrapping around you in soft, invisible layers, each breath a step deeper into the world of the Persian kings. Outside, the night stretches on, silent and watchful. And inside, the air hums with fragrance and memory, soft and slow, as the king breathes in the power of his empire, one scent at a time. The air, thick with fragrance, settles into your skin like a second layer, warm and heavy, as if you're wrapped in the king's own robe of power. The quiet hum of conversation lingers, but now the mood has shifted, softened into a slower, lazier rhythm, like the last embers of a fire glowing in the dark. The king leans back, his gaze distant, and the sound of crackling oil lamps fills the space between breaths. A small, crackling fire pit glows near the edge of the tent, its flames low and steady, casting flickering shadows that dance across the faces of the gathered nobles. You hear the soft murmur of voices, snippets of stories curling through the warm, perfumed air. One of the elder warriors begins to speak, his voice rough like a well-worn saddle, telling a tale from years past, of a battle fought on the edge of the world, where a single, unexpected sandstorm turned the tide. His hands move as he speaks, drawing shapes in the air, the firelight flickering across his weathered face. You listen as the story unfolds, how the king himself, then a young prince, had stood at the front, robes whipping in the wind, eyes narrowed against the stinging sand. The soldiers had nearly despaired, their spears useless in the choking storm. But the prince, calm, steady, had raised his arms and signaled a retreat, using the storm's chaos to mask their movements. They circled back under the cover of night, surprising the enemy at dawn. The tale is punctuated by soft laughter and the occasional clink of goblets. You catch a low whisper nearby. Some say the storm was summoned by the gods themselves, a blessing on the king's destiny. Another voice, softer, replies, or perhaps it was just luck. Historians still argue about whether the sandstorm was predicted by the royal astrologers or just a happy accident. You feel the weight of the story settle in your bones, the quiet pride of men who survived and the soft ache of those who didn't. The fire crackles on, its light glinting off the golden embroidery of the tent walls, hunting scenes, battles frozen in time, and delicate vines curling around the edges. The scent of sandalwood mixes, now with something earthier, the faint trace of roasted chestnuts perhaps, or dried figs warming by the fire. Your stomach gives a little hopeful rumble, but you stay where you are, wrapped in the comfort of the moment. A younger soldier, his eyes bright with wine and the weight of half-formed dreams, begins to tell his own story. About the time a camel, of all things, had wandered into a chariot race and accidentally won. The tale is so ridiculous that it sparks a ripple of laughter across the tent, even from the king, who raises an eyebrow and murmurs, "Ah, the victories we don't plan are sometimes the sweetest." You smile quietly, letting the sounds of laughter and the crackle of the fire sink into you, the warmth of the night folding around you like soft wool. Another servant approaches with a small tray of dried fruits and honeyed almonds, and you accept a fig, biting into its sweet, sticky flesh. It tastes like the sun distilled into a single golden bite, warm, rich, and slightly chewy, with the faintest hint of spice. The conversation drifts, winding like smoke, stories of battles, of love won and lost, of the strange omens that once guided kings, a falcon seen at dawn, a cloud shaped like a lion, a dream of a river turning to gold. Some in the tent murmur that dreams are the whispers of the gods, while others argue that they're just the ramblings of tired minds. No one quite agrees, and perhaps that's the point. The firelight flickers, and you catch sight of the king's eyes, half-lidded, a faint gleam of amusement there, as if he, too, enjoys the absurdity of it all. His fingers tap a slow rhythm on the armrest, matching the soft drumbeat of the fire. A servant adjusts the king's robe, a faint scent of rose and cedarwood rising in the air. And you watch as the fabric shimmers in the low light, threads of gold catching the fire's glow. The room feels smaller now, more intimate, the laughter softer, the voices lower, as if the tent itself is leaning in, listening. You find yourself leaning back, letting your gaze drift upward, following the smoke as it curls lazily toward the darkened ceiling. The scent of firewood and rose lingers in your nose, and the heat of the night presses gently against your skin, like the weight of a warm blanket. You can almost feel the heartbeat of the empire beneath your feet, steady, slow, unbothered by the ticking of time. The stories blend into each other, the laughter fading into a soft, steady hum, and your breath slows, matching the rhythm of the night. You let it all sink in, the firelight, the scent of ancient perfumes, the quiet hum of stories half true, half legend. The world feels warm and safe and just a little bit unreal, as if you're floating in the quiet space between dreams. And somewhere, far away, the desert wind whispers, carrying with it the soft scent of figs, the warmth of fire, and the echo of battles long past. The laughter fades, leaving behind a warm hush, like the soft closing of a book at the end of a long day. The fire crackles on, the shadows lengthening, the scent of roasted figs and sandalwood still heavy in the air. You breathe it in, deep, slow, and feel the weight of the night settle into your bones. And just when you think the tent has quieted for the night, a figure appears at the entrance, stepping lightly over the layered carpets. The king's personal poet, they say. A man draped in robes so dark they seem to drink in the lamplight, his hair streaked with silver, his eyes sharp as the edge of a blade. He bows low, the bells on his sleeves jingling softly. And when he speaks, his voice is a whisper, low and rough, like sand sliding across stone. He begins to recite. The words spill into the air, slow and measured, each syllable a brushstroke on the canvas of the night. His voice rises and falls, weaving tales of kings long past, of gods who walked the earth in disguise, of rivers that ran with gold and tears. You feel the words sink into you, soft as a lullaby, sharp as a memory. He speaks of a king who conquered not with swords, but with silence, who, in the heat of battle, ordered his men to sit, still as stones, and let the enemy's fear grow until it consumed them. Some say it happened just as the poet describes, while others argue it's a tale spun from fragments of truth and smoke. Historians still debate, of course, but in the hush of the tent, no one interrupts. The poet's hands move as he speaks, painting invisible shapes in the air. His fingers flutter like leaves caught in a breeze, or like the flickering shadows of the oil lamps that dance across the king's face. The king watches, his eyes half-lidded, the faintest smile playing at the corner of his mouth. You can almost feel the weight of the words as they drift through the tent, heavy and golden, like coins scattered across a silken carpet. The air feels thicker somehow, as if the stories themselves are adding to the scent of sandalwood and rose, the quiet hum of the night. And then the poet's voice softens, dropping to a hush so low you have to lean in to catch the words. He tells of a love story, one woven through battles and betrayal, of a king who fell for a woman from a conquered land, a woman whose eyes, they say, held the storms of the desert. The king wrote her letters in the dark, words pressed onto parchment like a prayer, and sent them by secret messengers who rode through the night like whispers on the wind. Some say the letters still exist, hidden in the archives of the empire, their words too dangerous to read aloud. Others claim they were burned long ago, the ashes scattered over the palace gardens. And yet, as the poet's voice fades, you can almost see them. The fragile scrolls, the ink faded, but the longing still there, echoing across time. A pause. The poet lowers his hands, his head bowing low, and for a moment, The tent holds its breath. The fire crackles softly, the scent of myrrh curling through the air, and you can hear, faintly, the sound of footsteps outside, guards changing shift, the soft clink of armor, the steady breath of a camel settling down for the night. The king exhales, a slow, satisfied sigh, and gestures for the poet to sit. The poet bows again, folding himself neatly onto a cushion, his face calm, as if the words he's just spoken have slipped into the fabric of the tent and no longer belong to him. You let your eyes drift half closed, the glow of the fire turning the air to liquid gold. The scent of sandalwood clings to your skin, the words of the poem lingering like an aftertaste in your mouth. Bitter, sweet, sharp. And as the night hums on, you feel it all blur together. The stories, the scents, the sounds, the slow, steady pulse of an empire at rest. Your breath slows, matching the rhythm of the poet's words, the crackle of the fire, the soft, endless sigh of the desert wind outside. And somewhere, just beyond the walls of the tent, the stars burn quietly, watching it all. The hush of the tent settles over you like a soft blanket, warm and a little heavy, as if the stories themselves are weighing down the air. The poet's words still linger, their echoes swirling around the lamplit space like smoke. You feel it in your chest, a quiet hum, like the aftertaste of something rich and bittersweet. The king's eyes drift closed for a moment, his face softened by the firelight. You think he might be drifting off, but then a servant approaches with careful, measured steps, carrying something small and wrapped in deep blue cloth. The king's fingers twitch, and the servant kneels, unwrapping the cloth to reveal, of all things, a pair of slippers. Not just any slippers, of course. These are silken, pale as moonlight, their soles stitched with gold thread in a pattern that looks like waves curling over each other. And at the toes, tiny pearls are sewn, glinting softly in the lamplight. The slippers are so delicate, so absurdly beautiful, that you half expect them to float in midair. The king slips them on with the ease of a man who's done this 1,000 times. The fabric molds to his feet like a whisper, and you notice how the attendants watch with the intensity of men guarding a treasure. Because, in a way, they are. One of the younger servants leans in close and whispers, maybe too loud for a whisper, really. They say the slippers are so soft it feels like walking on clouds made of rabbit dreams. You bite back a quiet laugh, but the king, ever so faintly, smiles, a flicker of amusement dancing in the corner of his mouth. Another attendant, older and more serious, mutters something about the slippers being woven from silk brought by caravans from the farthest edges of the empire, dyed with the juice of rare berries found only in the valleys of the Zagros Mountains. And of course there's a debate. There's always a debate. Some say the slippers are infused with oils that soothe the muscles after battle. Others insist they're enchanted, and a few grumble that they're just very expensive shoes. Historians, naturally, still argue about whether the king's slippers held any true significance, or were simply a sign of opulence. But as the king rises, his feet gliding soundlessly over the carpets, you can't help but notice how the entire room seems to lean into that motion, how the nobles hold their breath just a little, how the servants' eyes flicker to the floor, how even the flickering flames in the oil lamps seem to pause, as if the slippers carry with them an unspoken power. The king moves with a grace that makes you wonder if he even remembers what it's like to stumble, to stub a toe, to trip over an uneven stone. You imagine a life where your feet never feel the grit of sand, where every step is cushioned by silk and soft words. Outside, the night hums on, the faintest breeze fluttering the tent flaps. You catch a glimpse of the stars again, cold and bright, scattered across the sky like scattered jewels. The desert air slips in, cool and dry, carrying with it a hint of something ancient. The scent of distant fires, maybe, or the memory of rain that hasn't fallen in years. The king pauses near the edge of the tent, his gaze distant, as if listening to something only he can hear. His fingers brush lightly over the embroidered wall, tracing the patterns, hunters and lions, vines curling into endless loops, the faint outline of a falcon in flight. A noble nearby clears his throat and says, almost as if to himself, "They say the king's slippers have never touched dust." You glance down at your own feet, dusty, tired, very much not shrouded in silk, and feel the quiet weight of that thought settle in your chest. The king turns back to the room, his eyes half-lidded, the faintest smile on his lips, and for a moment, it's as if time slows, the entire tent holding its breath as the scent of rosewater and warm silk wraps around you like a story half-whispered in the dark. The fire crackles softly, a single spark drifting upward, and you let yourself sink into the quiet, into the hum of the night, the flicker of flame, the soft, steady glide of slippers across golden carpets. And somewhere, beneath it all, the Empire breathes. Slow, steady, endless. The soft sound of the slippers fades into the hush of the tent, swallowed by the thick air heavy with rose, sandalwood, and the slow crackle of the fire. The king settles back onto his divan, the cushions sinking beneath his weight with a faint sigh, and for a long moment, no one moves. Then, almost as if a silent signal has passed through the room, a servant steps forward, this one older, his robe a deep green, his hands steady despite the faint tremble in his knuckles. He carries a goblet, dark and gleaming, filled with wine so deep a red it's almost black, glinting under the lamps like liquid garnet. The king accepts it with the ease of a man who knows the weight of the world rests in his palm, and as he lifts the goblet, the scent drifts toward you, heady, spiced, with a whisper of pomegranate. A murmur ripples through the tent. It's the pomegranate wine, the wine of kings. They say it's pressed from fruit grown in secret groves, fed with water drawn from hidden springs, and harvested only when the moon is full. You hear a noble whisper that a single goblet is worth a fortune. Others argue it's the ritual, not the liquid itself, that gives it power. Historians naturally can't agree. Some say the wine was believed to grant immortality. Others insist it was a symbol of fertility. Maybe it was just a very fancy way to impress visitors. The king swirls the goblet, watching the liquid catch the light, and for a moment, the room seems to still, like the air itself is holding its breath, waiting for the sip. He drinks. A slow, measured swallow, the kind that makes you think he's tasting not just the wine, but the years it took to grow the fruit, the hands that picked it, the hidden springs, the full moon, the whispers of the earth itself. He lowers the goblet, and the faintest sigh escapes his lips. A sound so quiet, it's barely there, but it ripples through the tent like a silent command to relax. You're offered a cup, too, a small clay vessel, warm in your hand. You lift it, letting the scent bloom in your nose. Rich, tangy, with a sharp edge that makes your tongue tingle before you even take a sip. The taste is like a liquid jewel, bright, deep, a little sharp, with a sweetness that lingers on the back of your tongue like the echo of a song you can't quite remember. A noble leans in, his voice low and conspiratorial. They say the pomegranate seeds hold the souls of the departed, each sip a reminder of life's sweetness, each drop a memory of those who came before. Another voice chimes in, half laughing. Or maybe it's just a very good wine. Who's to say? The conversation drifts like smoke, lazy and curling, as the king cradles the goblet, his fingers tapping a slow, steady rhythm against the metal, his eyes half close, the weight of the day, the empire, the stars themselves pressing in on his shoulders. And then he speaks, voice low and warm, a quiet ripple through the air. A story of a time when a young prince, long before he was a king, shared pomegranate wine with a foreign emissary beneath the desert moon. The wine was a gift, a symbol of peace. But the emissary, so they say, drank too deeply, grew bold, and challenged the prince to a game of wits. It was a night of laughter, of whispered secrets, of plans drawn in the sand by firelight. And in the morning, the emissary left with a smile, the seeds of an alliance planted in the dark, watered by wine and possibility. Or so the story goes. Some say the emissary later betrayed the king. Others insist he became a loyal ally, a brother in arms. Historians, of course, can't seem to agree, but here, in the quiet of the tent, no one argues. The king takes another sip, and the scent of the wine mingles with the warm air. Pomegranate, cinnamon, a faint whisper of cloves. The oil lamps flicker, their flames casting long shadows that stretch across the tent walls, dancing over embroidered lions and curling vines, their shapes bending and shifting like stories told too many times. You breathe in, the wine's taste still on your tongue, the scent of spices wrapping around you like a soft blanket, and feel your eyelids grow heavy, the hum of the tent like a distant lullaby. The fire crackles softly, the night hums on, and somewhere outside, the desert wind sighs through the dunes, carrying the scent of pomegranate and the quiet weight of a kingdom at rest. The taste of pomegranate still lingers faintly on your tongue, warm and rich, as the fire's glow dips lower, its light softening into a gentle flicker. The king leans back, his gaze distant, and you follow the slow drift of his eyes across the tent, where the hum of conversation has softened into quiet murmurs, where the servants move like ghosts, and where, in the far corner, a game board is being set out once again. This time, though, it isn't the Beatles. It's Nard. The Game of Kings, they call it. The board gleams under the lamps, inlaid with lapis lazuli and thin lines of gold. The pieces, small and carved from ivory, their surfaces worn smooth by countless hands. You watch as they're arranged with careful precision, each piece set in its place as though it holds the weight of fate itself. The king lifts the dice, tiny cubes carved from polished bone, and rolls them slowly between his fingers. The soft clatter as they tumble onto the board is almost lost beneath the low murmur of the tent. The sounds of shifting fabric, the faint hiss of a lamp being adjusted, the distant whisper of the desert wind brushing against the canvas walls. A noble leans forward, eyes sharp, and you catch a flicker of something like anticipation in the king's gaze. The rules of Nard are simple, they say. Simple, and yet, the game has been known to last for hours, even days depending on the stakes. And tonight, the stakes are high. A servant murmurs the wager under his breath. A falcon, trained to hunt with such precision, it can snatch a hair from the sand without a sound. The king's own prize falcon, no less. The room tightens, the air sharpening as if the very lamps are leaning in to listen. The game begins. The dice clatter, the pieces move, and the sound of their shifting, soft, deliberate, becomes a kind of music in the quiet tent. You watch the patterns unfold, the push and pull of strategy playing out across the board like a slow dance. The king's fingers are steady, moving his pieces with a calm confidence that makes you wonder. How many times has he played this game? How many nights like this, under the glow of oil lamps, has he weighed the fate of a falcon or a fortune in silk or the promise of a loyal general? A noble across the board narrows his eyes, hesitating before his next move. Someone whispers that this noble is a master of the game, that he once defeated 3 opponents in a single night. Another voice, softer, adds that the king himself hasn't lost a game in years. Though historians, of course, argue whether that's entirely true, or just a flattering tale repeated by those who'd rather not lose their heads. The pieces clack softly, the tension rising and falling like the breath of the tent itself. The air hums with the scent of spiced wine and faint traces of rosewater, the warmth of the lamps blending with the slow, even breath of the men around you. You glance down at the board, tracing the paths of the pieces, and you wonder how much of the king's mind is here on the game, and how much is elsewhere, tangled in the quiet weight of the empire, in the shifting alliances, in the slow, endless grind of teen against stone. A sudden move, a daring sweep across the board, and a murmur ripples through the room. The noble's eyes narrow, the king's fingers hover, the dice roll again. And then, almost lazily, the king makes his play. A quiet clack of ivory on ivory, a small shift, and the game tips. Subtle, inevitable. The noble exhales, a faint smile curling at the edges of his mouth, as if to say, "Ah, well played." The king's gaze holds steady, and for a moment, it's as if the entire room is a held breath, the flicker of the lamps caught mid-dance, a soft sigh, the sound of a goblet being lifted, the shuffle of silk robes. The tension eases, the room loosens, and the conversation drifts back into quiet laughter. The king leans back, his hands resting lightly on the carved arms of his seat, the faintest glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. The falcon is his, at least for tonight. The oil lamps flicker, the shadows stretch long, and you breathe in the scent of wine, ivory, and the slow, steady heartbeat of a kingdom at rest. Your eyelids grow heavier, the sounds of the game fading into the soft, endless hum of the night. And somewhere outside, the wind sighs across the dunes, carrying with it the quiet secrets of an empire built on patience, on power, and on the careful placement of a single ivory piece on a worn, golden board. The soft clatter of the game pieces fades into the background, like the memory of a conversation you can't quite recall. The tent breathes quietly, lamplight flickering against the golden embroidery, shadows stretching long and thin. The air is warm, dense with the lingering scents of sandalwood and wine, a whisper of roasted spices still hanging in the corners, like an echo from the feast long past. The king shifts in his seat, the cushions sighing beneath him, and an attendant approaches, this one bearing a small carved box, its lid inlaid with slivers of mother of pearl, its hinges gleaming softly. With a careful bow, the attendant opens the box, revealing a collection of oils, each contained in tiny glass bottles that catch the firelight and throw faint rainbows across the tent walls. The scent rises immediately, rich, sweet, and heady. It's the beard oil. A ritual, quiet but practiced, unfolds. A servant, nimble-fingered and silent, dips a slender wooden stick into the first bottle, drawing out a thin line of glistening amber liquid. He warms it between his palms, rubbing gently until the scent blooms. Warm sandalwood, sharp cedar, and something softer, floral, like the faintest hint of rose. With careful fingers, he begins to work the oil into the king's beard, stroking the dark, oiled hair with reverence, as though it's a relic, a tapestry of power woven across the king's face. The scent grows stronger, wrapping around you, seeping into your skin, until you feel almost drowsy with it. This heady mix of wood, spice, and something sweet, like honey left in the sun too long. The king's eyes drift half-closed, his breath slow and even, a quiet hum in the back of his throat, as if the touch of the oil is more than a grooming ritual. It's a balm for the weight he carries. You catch the faintest whisper from a servant nearby. They say the length of a man's beard reveals the wisdom in his soul. Another voice, softer, chimes in. Or perhaps it's just a clever way to hide crumbs from dinner. A faint ripple of laughter stirs the air, and you find yourself smiling, letting the soft humor drift over you like a breeze. The oil glistens in the lamplight, catching in the curls of the beard, arched hair shining as though it's been dipped in liquid gold. The scent is intoxicating, blending with the faint crackle of the fire and the low, rhythmic sigh of the wind brushing against the tent walls. A noble, reclining on a cushion nearby, lifts a goblet lazily and muses. Some say the Persians believed a well-oiled beard was a sign of divine favor, that the gods themselves would guide the hand of a man whose beard gleamed in the moonlight. Another, half-laughing, half-serious, counters. Or maybe it was just to keep the lice away. You stifle a grin, feeling the warmth of the moment settle into your bones. The king shifts slightly, the oils glinting on his skin, and the attendant reaches for another bottle. This one darker, thicker, with a scent like burnt sugar and smoke. The servant dabs a drop onto the king's temples, murmuring softly about its properties, how it's said to sharpen the mind, to keep the body strong, to ensure that even in sleep, the king dreams only of victory. You glance at the king's face, calm, composed, yet there's something behind the eyes, a flicker of thought perhaps, a memory, a plan. The scent of the oil drifts to you, mingling with the soft heat of the tent, and you let your eyes drift half-closed, the world around you blurring into a tapestry of scent, sound, and gentle motion. The servants work in silence, their hands moving with a quiet rhythm, like waves lapping at a shore, and you feel yourself swaying slightly with the motion, your breath slowing, matching the soft cadence of the night. The oil glistens in the firelight, the king's beard gleaming like a dark river, winding through a golden valley. And the scent, rich, warm, faintly sweet, wraps around you, a soft weight pulling you deeper into the warmth of the tent. You let it all wash over you. The scent of sandalwood and honey, the soft laughter, the flicker of flames, the quiet hum of power that thrums beneath it all. And somewhere outside, the desert wind sighs, carrying the scent of oiled beards, rose petals, and ancient stories into the night. The soft scent of sandalwood and honeyed oils lingers in the air, curling around you like an invisible thread woven through the night. The fire's glow flickers low, its light casting long, dancing shadows across the tent walls. Images of lions, swirling vines, and silent, watchful eyes stitched into the fabric in threads of gold. The king leans back, a faint sigh escaping as the oil seeps into his skin, the tension in his shoulders melting away like wax in the heat. But the night isn't quite ready to let him rest. A small, slender figure approaches from the far end of the tent. Another servant, her hands steady, her eyes lowered. She carries a slender stick, barely the length of a finger, its end smoldering gently, sending up a thin curl of smoke that smells sharp, sweet, and just a little bitter. It's sandalwood, burned slowly, mixed with crushed herbs, thyme, a hint of frankincense, and something softer you can't quite place. The servant moves in careful circles around the king, trailing the smoke like a painter, adding the final strokes to a masterpiece. The scent fills the air, a little stronger now, wrapping itself around the oil's warmth, the lingering trace of wine, and the deep, steady breath of the tent itself. You breathe it in, slow and deep, and it feels like you're inhaling the very essence of the empire, rich, layered, both ancient and alive. A faint smile tugs at the corners of your mouth. One of the older nobles nearby mutters under his breath, "They say the smoke of sandalwood can drive away dark spirits." Or at least, the memory of defeat. Another voice, lighter, more teasing, says, "Or maybe it just keeps the mosquitoes away." You hear a soft ripple of laughter, the kind that doesn't break the quiet, just folds into it. A pause, and then a story drifts from across the tent, told in a voice warm and slow. It's about a general who, before battle, insisted on sitting in a tent like this one, breathing in sandalwood smoke for hours. They say he believed the smoke made his mind sharper, his sword swifter, and his heart braver. Some say it worked. He won the battle with barely a drop of blood spilled. Others whisper that the smoke dulled his senses, and it was sheer luck that saved him. Historians still debate the details, as they always do. But tonight, no one argues. The smoke swirls, the scent settles, and the stories hang in the air like a second skin. The servant moves in slow circles, her steps soundless, the stick of sandalwood glowing faintly at the tip like an ember holding on to the last breath of a fire. The scent weaves through the tent, curling through your hair, clinging to your clothes, sinking into your skin until you feel as though you, too, are part of the ritual, anointed by smoke and story alike. The king's eyes drift half-closed, his fingers resting lightly on the carved arm of his seat. His beard glistens faintly, catching the soft glow of the oil lamps, and you wonder if he feels the weight of it all, the power, the history, the quiet burden of being the center of every gaze. The flames flicker lower, the tent growing darker, softer, as if the very walls are leaning in, listening. The sound of breathing is steady, slow, a shared rhythm among those gathered here. The scent of the smoke deepens, filling the space until it feels like you could almost reach out and touch it, soft and warm as velvet. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the scent settle into you, the sound of the fire blending with the faint crackle of the smoldering stick, the slow, even breath of the king as he drifts somewhere between waking and sleep. The wind outside whispers, barely a sigh, brushing against the canvas walls, carrying with it the faintest hint of the desert. Cool sand, the sharp scent of distant herbs, the soft rustle of palm fronds in the moonlight. You let your shoulders relax, the tension melting away with the smoke, and you wonder, for a quiet moment, if this is what power truly feels like. Not the clash of swords, but the slow, steady hum of a world that bends itself around you, one soft breath at a time. The smoke curls, the story lingers, and the night stretches on, soft and endless as the sky above. The sandalwood smoke hangs in the air, thick and warm, wrapping the tent in a veil of scent that clings to your skin, your hair, the folds of your clothes. It lingers like a soft hum in the background, curling lazily into the golden embroidery that glows faintly under the dim light. The king shifts slightly, his gaze drifting once more toward the far side of the tent, where something catches your eye. Draped across the back of his seat, almost casually, is a tiger-skin pelt, its fur gleaming in the low light, stripes dark and bold against the pale gold of the cushions. You blink, your mind catching for a moment. A tiger. Here, in the middle of the Persian camp, surrounded by sand and smoke and spiced wine. A soft murmur ripples through the tent as a noble leans in to whisper. They say it was a gift from a distant land, carried across mountains and rivers, a symbol of power, and a reminder that even the fiercest creatures can be tamed by a king. Another voice, quieter, adds with a hint of a grin. Or maybe it's just a really good rug. You stifle a laugh, but your eyes drift back to the tiger's stripes, the way they catch the lamplight, how the dark lines ripple like waves on a golden sea. And you wonder, just for a heartbeat, was it a real tiger? Or perhaps a clever imitation, stitched together by artisans with a flair for the dramatic? Historians still argue, of course. Some say it was a genuine pelt from a Bengal tiger, a symbol of the king's dominion stretching to the farthest reaches of the empire. Others insist it was just a particularly convincing rug, a bit of flair to impress visiting dignitaries. But here, tonight, the truth hardly matters. The tiger's gaze, embroidered or not, feels as though it's watching, waiting, a silent sentinel in the flickering glow of the fire. The king runs his fingers lightly over the fur, his expression unreadable, as if remembering something only he knows. A servant steps forward, offering a small dish of dates and almonds. But the king waves it away, his eyes still fixed on the tiger skin, lost in thought. You wonder what he's thinking. Does the tiger remind him of a hunt? A victory hard won in a distant jungle, where the air was thick with moisture and the ground pulsed with the hidden movements of unseen creatures? Or is it simply a symbol, a trophy, a story woven into the fabric of his rule? The fire crackles softly, the scent of smoke and spiced oils blending with the faint sweetness of roasted nuts. A breeze stirs the edge of the tent, fluttering the tiger's tail, making it seem, just for a moment, alive. A noble begins to tell a story, voice low and measured. It's a tale of a king who faced a tiger in single combat, armed only with a dagger and his own courage. They say the king won, of course, because the story wouldn't be worth telling otherwise. But even as the words drift into the warm air, someone else leans in, murmuring that it was probably just a game of strategy, an ambush, a well-placed trap, not some reckless act of bravery. And once again, historians disagree. The story fades into the soft crackle of the fire, the scent of the smoke curling through the air, the quiet hum of a night that seems to stretch on forever. The tiger skin lies still, its stripes dark and bold, a reminder, real or not, that power often wears the face of something wild, something fierce, something that might once have roamed the edges of the world. You let your breath slow, the warmth of the tent seeping into your bones, the flicker of firelight blurring at the edges of your vision. The tiger watches, silent and still, as the king leans back once more, his hand resting on the arm of his seat, the faint glint of a ring catching the light. And the night hums on, soft and steady, the wind whispering through the desert beyond, the scent of sandalwood fading into the dark, and the quiet presence of the tiger. A story, a memory, a question unanswered, lingering in the golden air. The glow of the fire softens, dipping lower, as the night settles heavier around you. The scent of sandalwood lingers, but now it's joined by something else, faint, metallic, like the scent of the desert just before dawn, when the air is sharp and still, and the sky is holding its breath. You hear it first, the faintest sound, a soft clink, the shuffle of sandals against carpet. The guards are changing. A quiet ripple moves through the tent as new figures appear in the doorway, their faces shadowed, their armor glinting faintly in the lamplight. They stand at attention, their spears gleaming, their gazes sharp, though there's a weariness in their eyes, the kind that comes from too many nights under too many stars. One of them, younger than the rest, shifts slightly on his feet, the weight of his armor a quiet strain on his shoulders. His eyes flicker to the king, still seated, still serene, as if the weight of the empire is as light as the silk cushions beneath him. And then, from somewhere deeper in the camp, a sound stirs the air, a low, distant howl, sharp, brief, then gone. A jackal, maybe, or something else. A murmur spreads, soft as a breath. You catch a snatch of it. Some say it's the spirits of the fallen, wandering the sands, searching for their way back. Another voice counters, lower still. Or it's just a jackal, nothing more. But the unease lingers, a thread pulled tight beneath the surface of the tent's warmth. The guards shift their grips on their spears, their eyes scanning the edges of the lamplight, where the dark seems to press closer, thicker somehow. The young guard glances at the older one beside him, who just shakes his head, a slow, measured motion, as if to say, no questions tonight. Just watch. Just breathe. The king doesn't stir. His gaze remains distant, his fingers resting lightly on the arm of his seat, the faintest glint of a ring catching the low light. You wonder if he hears the howl, if he registers the tension in the air, the sharp breath of the guards, The way the darkness seems to breathe just a little louder. Tonight, someone whispers that the jackals are drawn to the scent of sandalwood and myrrh, that they can smell the oil clinging to the king's beard, the lingering perfume in the air. Another, softer still, murmurs that the spirits of fallen enemies might be circling, their whispers carried on the wind. Historians, of course, argue about these things, whether such stories were truly believed or simply tales told to stir the heart and sharpen the spear. But here, in the dim glow of the tent, you feel the pull of the night. The way the darkness outside seems to press in, soft but insistent, like the weight of a heavy blanket. The wind brushes the edges of the tent, and for a moment, the fabric ripples like the surface of a quiet lake. The lamplight catching on its folds, creating shapes that flicker and shift. Shadows of lions, perhaps, or falcons, or something older, something that has no name. The guards stand still, the young one's breath slowing, matching the rhythm of the night, while the older one's gaze remains fixed, sharp, and steady, like a blade held in the dark. The king breathes softly, his chest rising and falling, a quiet, measured rhythm that seems to guide the very air around him. And you too find your breath slowing, matching the soft pulse of the lamps, the faint sigh of the desert wind, the slow, steady thrum of a kingdom at rest beneath the weight of the stars. Outside, the jackal, if it was a jackal, falls silent. The guards shift their weight, the night deepens, and the air hums with the quiet, watchful stillness of a world that holds its secrets close. And you sit, letting the warmth of the tent sink into your bones, the scent of sandalwood and oil lingering on your skin, the flicker of lamplight softening at the edges of your vision, and the breath of the empire steady, slow, and waiting. The hush after the jackal's call settles over the tent like a soft veil, and the air seems to hold its breath, waiting. The guards stand still, statues in the glow of the oil lamps, their spears upright, their faces unreadable beneath the shimmer of the night. But there's a flicker, soft, brief, barely a shift in the air. A servant moves quietly to the king's side, her robe a whisper of pale silk against the deep, dark hues of the tent. In her hands, she carries a small, shallow bowl, its surface glinting faintly, the contents hidden beneath a folded cloth. She kneels low, her head bowed so deeply it almost touches the carpet, and with the faintest motion, she lifts the cloth. Gold coins, dozens of them, scattered like stars across the bowl, each one stamped with the king's seal, glinting in the firelight, their surfaces worn smooth by countless hands, by the passage of time. The soft, almost imperceptible sound of metal against metal fills the space, a gentle clinking that seems to echo far louder than it should. The king tilts his head slightly, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. His fingers drift over the coins, a slow, almost absent-minded motion, as though he's weighing their worth not in gold, but in stories. And there are stories, of course. A noble leans in, voice low and smooth, whispering that these coins are more than currency. They're tokens of loyalty, symbols of promises made in the dark, of debts paid and unpaid. Another voice, softer still, murmurs that some believe the coins themselves hold a trace of the king's power, that to touch one is to carry a sliver of his strength, his will, his unspoken commands. Historians, naturally, debate it. Some say the coins were merely practical, minted for trade, stamped for control. Others argue they were imbued with symbolism, each one a quiet thread in the vast tapestry of the empire. A few, those given to romantic notions, whisper that the coins were kissed by the king himself before they were sent into the world. You watch as the king lifts a single coin, turning it between his fingers, the edges catching the lamplight like a tiny crescent moon. The air hums around him, quiet and close, the scent of sandalwood and oil wrapping tighter, the sound of the coins a soft, steady whisper. And then, soft, so soft you almost think you imagined it, a flicker of something else. A game, perhaps. A wager whispered beneath the scent of smoke. The king's eyes glint, sharp and sly, as he flicks the coin across the carpet. It lands with a quiet thud near the foot of a noble seated nearby, who raises his brows but says nothing. A ripple passes through the tent. Barely a breath, a half-laughed exhale, a quiet glance exchanged. A game of chance begins, but the rules are never spoken aloud. The coins pass between hands, fingers brushing briefly, eyes narrowing in silent challenge. No words, only gestures. A tilt of the chin, a raised brow, a faint smile playing at the corner of a mouth. The stakes, too, are a secret. Whispers too soft to catch. Half-formed promises, debts that may never be called in. The coins clink softly, the sound weaving into the fabric of the night, a quiet music that pulses beneath the glow of the lamps. The scent of sandalwood grows fainter, replaced by the subtle sharpness of metal warmed by the fire. You feel the air shift, a quiet tension, like the moment before a sandstorm rises on the horizon. Gentle, almost imperceptible, but present, nonetheless. The king leans back, his fingers still gliding across the coins, and his gaze drifts once more toward the entrance of the tent, where the darkness beyond seems to stretch out, vast and endless, holding secrets like sand slipping through an hourglass. And you sit, the weight of the coins humming in the air, the scent of oil and gold clinging to your skin, the quiet, measured breath of the night wrapping around you like a cloak. The coins shift, the fire flickers, and the empire hums on, steady and slow, as the stories spin, soft as the wind. The sound of the coins lingers, a soft metallic murmur that fades into the background like a half-forgotten tune. The fire burns low, its light a faint glow against the tent walls, flickering over the embroidered lions and curling vines. The scent of sandalwood has mellowed now, blending into the warm, faintly sweet air, like the aftertaste of honey left on the tongue. The king sits still, his fingers resting lightly on the carved arm of his seat, the faintest gleam of oil on his skin catching the flicker of the lamp. His gaze drifts across the room, eyes half-lidded, as if he's watching not just the scene before him, but something beyond it. Something far older, slower, deeper. The night feels thick, like the air is holding its breath. And then, slowly, the king lifts his hand. The movement is small, almost imperceptible, but it ripples outward. A servant steps forward, holding a small brass basin, and with a slow, careful motion, the king dips his fingers into the water, cool, clear, and faintly scented with rose petals and crushed mint. The sound is soft, a quiet ripple as his fingers break the surface, and the water glimmers faintly, catching the golden glow of the lamps. He lifts his hand, droplets sliding down his wrist, catching briefly on the edge of a ring, before falling in slow, heavy drops back into the basin. The sound is soft, barely there, but in the quiet of the tent, it seems louder, more deliberate, as if even the water has been trained to obey the king's slow, measured pace. A noble leans in, voice low and hushed, as if sharing a secret not meant for the air. They say the king's blessings are given with water, a drop on the brow, a word unspoken, and you carry his favor like a shield. Another voice, softer, counters, or perhaps it's just tradition, rituals passed down so long no one remembers why they began. And, as always, the scholars disagree. Some say the water is sacred, drawn from hidden wells that only the king's attendants know, while others argue it's simply water, given weight by belief and repetition. The king's hand lingers above the basin, droplets clinging for a moment before slipping free, and you find your own breath slowing to match the rhythm. Inhale, exhale, the soft drip of water, the steady crackle of the fire. A servant approaches, carrying a small clay bowl, and offers it with both hands. The king dips his fingers again, this time sprinkling a few drops over the gathered nobles, the water catching in their hair, on their robes, on the creases of their brows. Each man bows his head, as if the water itself is a blessing, a quiet promise whispered into the skin. The scent of rose petals and mint drifts through the air, mingling with the fading traces of sandalwood and myrrh. It's soft, fresh, and somehow grounding, like a reminder that beneath all the gold and silk, the power and the stories, there is water, simple and clear, slipping through fingers like time. The king's gaze softens, the faintest smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, as if he knows, better than anyone, how easily water slips away, how quickly it dries on skin, leaving only the memory of coolness in its place. The nobles bow deeper, the tent heavy with the weight of unspoken words, of blessings given and debts remembered. A breeze stirs the edges of the tent, soft and fleeting, and the scent of rose and mint drifts with it, curling into the corners of the room, brushing against your skin like a quiet, invisible hand. You let your breath slow, the scent settling into you, the weight of the night holding steady, and you feel the quiet hum of the empire, soft, steady, endless, like water slipping over stone, like stories told in the dark, like the slow, quiet drip of rose-scented water into the heart of a kingdom that waits. The last droplets of rose-scented water glisten on the noble's brows, catching the faint glow of the oil lamps, tiny beads of light trembling for a moment before they slip away. The king's hand falls to rest on the arm of his seat, fingers curling loosely, the weight of the night settling across the tent like a soft, heavy quilt. A quiet murmur drifts through the air, low and steady. A servant's voice, reciting words too softly for you to catch, a ritual repeated so many times, it's become more breath than speech. The fire flickers low, the embers a warm, pulsing glow, as if the tent itself is breathing in time with the king's slow, measured breaths. He leans back, the faintest peaky escaping, a sound so soft it barely stirs the air, yet you feel it all the same. A gentle ripple that hums through the room like the final note of a song fading into silence. Another servant moves forward, carrying a tray of tiny silver cups, each filled with a pale liquid that glows faintly under the lamplight. It's a nightcap, a final gesture, a mixture of herbs, honey, and a touch of warm wine, meant to soothe the body and quiet the mind. The cups are passed carefully, hands brushing for the briefest moment, eyes lowered, breaths held. The king lifts his cup, his fingers steady, the liquid swirling gently within. His gaze drifts to the entrance of the tent, where the flaps shiver softly in the night breeze, the desert air cool and sharp beyond the warm cocoon of the lamplight. A whisper drifts through the room. They say the last drink of the night is a promise, to wake again, to see the dawn, to carry the weight of power for one more day. Another voice, soft as a sigh, replies, or maybe it's just a drink to ease the dreams. The king drinks, a slow, steady sip, the liquid catching the light like liquid moonlight, the scent of herbs rising briefly before fading into the soft hum of the tent. You sip too, the warmth spreading across your tongue, sweet, a little sharp, with a hint of something you can't quite name. It tastes like honey and smoke and the weight of a night that stretches on forever. The tent grows quieter, the fire's glow dipping lower, the air thick with the scent of rose, sandalwood, and the faint sweetness of the drink. The king's eyes close, his breath slow and deep, and the room seems to fold in on itself, smaller, softer, as if the weight of the world has been set down just for a moment. The guards at the entrance stand a little straighter, their eyes fixed on the dark beyond, the night beyond the tent, vast and waiting. The nobles settle into the silence, their hands resting on their knees, their faces softened by the dim light, their breaths steady and even. The hum of the empire slows, soft and steady, like the last quiet note of a drum fading into the earth. You close your eyes, the warmth of the drink still on your tongue, the scent of rose and honey wrapping around you, like a soft, invisible blanket. Your breath slows, matching the king's, matching the hum of the tent, the whisper of the wind, the soft, steady heartbeat of the desert. Outside, the stars burn cold and distant, watching from above, their light so far away it barely touches the earth. And inside, the world grows quiet, the flicker of the flames fading, the scent of the night curling into the corners like a forgotten prayer. You feel yourself drifting, and weightless, as the night hums around you, soft, endless, steady, and somewhere far away the king's breath slows, the empire breathes, and the stories sleep.